next thing is, they tell you to take, you could use a wire, they tell you to use either a wire brush or sandpaper and clean all of the residue from the old Bellows adhesive off of these surfaces here and off the surface there. And I don't know how you'd ever get in there with a wire brush. I mean, maybe you could put a wire brush on an electric drill or something and go around it, but it's pretty tight quarters in there. I used my fingers, and I used 2 or 3 strips of this of the maroon Scotch-Brite. I mean, I could use sandpaper, but this is abrasive and flexible, and gets down in. And there is a groove up here that's pretty deep that had a lot of stuff in it, and I worked on that and worked on it and worked on it. And then I got out some of my nitrile gloves and went at it with lacquer thinner. The instructions are, clean it with sandpaper and lacquer thinner. I actually soaked some of this in lacquer thinner and went around again, and I'll tell you, I've spent a couple hours on it, and I imagine a dealership mechanic wouldn't spend as much time as I did. So, I think I've been pretty thorough, and it's all good and clean. I'm not going to touch it too much because I don't want to get more grease on it. I'm about ready to install the new bellows. The service manuals, sometimes the service manuals are a little bit confusing, and not everything is in sequence. I'm going to install it in the sequence that I know that I had to use to get it apart. The end that goes on that flange, they want you to put bellows adhesive on and let it sit for about 10 minutes and then install it. Same thing with the shift boot. They want you to put, the book says, do the sealing surface with bellows adhesive, and then it says use the instructions with the tube of stuff. Well, the tube of bellows adhesive says paint a film on here and paint a film on there and let it sit for 10 minutes, not more than 10 minutes, because at 15 apparently it's too much. Then install it and then clamp it down. And this bellows, if you take the clamp off of here, says top on it in where the metal strip is. So I need to put it on with that to the top, and with the clamp like this with the screw facing down. That's how it came apart. And then this one needs to go on. Being that takes 10 minutes or whatever, I'm going to go and do that, put these in place, and then come back. And before I start going back together, I've mentioned before I have an exhaust tube on here. That's not an official Mercury part for this application. I don't think it hurts anything, but I don't know that this was certified for that, so I can't recommend doing that. But this, I saved it in my parts box. This is my old exhaust bellows, and I had become frustrated because this was installed in here, and the boat was only a few years old, and it came apart. This end was off, and I probably ran for a whole season with it off, and didn't seem like it had any ill effect. But I bought the tools. I went through all the work to reinstall this, glue it down, use the bellows tool to expand it back and install it on the bell housing. I did all the things I was supposed to do, torqued it down, and I went a couple of weeks and poof, it was off again. And I suppose maybe it got hot and hardened or something, but it wasn't really flexible. And having had it apart twice already, when I found that the Bravos used this water tube, particularly more for bigger engines than this 5-liter, I said, let's give that a try. And so that's what I've been running on there. In this whole process, I didn't really feel a need to take that off. It can stay put. It's a little hard to get in here to clean this one for the shift tube, but it's working out. So anyway, that's what's supposed to go in here. And again, there's a bellows tool. You install this on here with the and clamp it down with the adhesive. And then after you get the bell housing in, you have to come through with the bellows tool and pull it to get it mounted on the bell housing. And there's a whole process for that, but that's what's supposed to be here. Alright, well, I'm going to start with the shift boot. I have a brand new fresh tube of bellows adhesive that says that it's made in July of 2024, and the box says it's got a 15-month shelf life, unopened shelf life. And they suggest brushing it, so I'm going to put a little bit on a brush and try to get it on here, like so. And I got an extra complication because I put this, I've got this fishing line going through here just to, because I want to be able to help guide in the shift cable around the exhaust. It's kind of an experiment, so we'll do that. Put a little bit here in the end of the boot in the same way. We're just going to smear that stuff in there. The instructions say to let it sit for 10 minutes, so this is one of those things where I'm going to follow the instructions. The book says 10 minutes. The package says till tacky. I would say it's tacky and it's been 5 minutes, so we're going to run this one in. Plug this on. See if we can get that clamp in there. I was having a little bit of trouble getting that all the way on, but I think I finally did. You know, as that glue gets tacky, it sort of doesn't want to move anymore. I guess sometimes you got to move a little faster. There's not a lot of room to swing the ratchet either, so we'll use the universal joint. And then I reposition it up a couple times, because as you tighten it, it turns around, and you want it, I think when you get done, you want it pretty much vertical. And they want 35 inch-pounds on the clamp. Took me a while to get there, but I've got an inch-pound wrench that fits on here, so I finally think I've got it. Alright, I'm there. Alright, before I put the next bellows on, I'm going to put in a piece of this 1/4 inch hose to up to this fitting and get that hanging in here, because it'll be kind of behind. I could do it, but it'll be easier. And all I need is a 10-inch piece to replace the old one that was bad. They only sell it as a 54-inch chunk, and I think you take 10 inches off, and then the other 44 inches is for the inside if you need to go up to the bottle. So the way this came apart, this hose was up on the top, and it had a tie wrap on it. The bottom one had one of these clamps on it, and there's no way that I can get in there and retighten this clamp. There's just, it's unreasonable. And the book says this clamp belongs on the top, and I'm supposed to use the tie wrap on the bottom, because I can go down inside and tighten it and clip it off after the fact, and that'll be a better way. So anyway, we're going to try that. I need to get it on there all the way. There we go. And that's why I didn't want to put the bellows on first. I wanted to get this while I could. Let's see if that clamp will go. Finally got that dude up there. And it's back behind where the bellows goes. And this hose will connect to the bell housing. Will go right here. So for the moment, I'm just going to take that and aim it down the bottom out of the way. The book said to apply Bellows adhesive and let it dry for 10 minutes. I'm going to put 2 coats on, and the container says to do it tacky. I'm going to try to not let it go quite as long. It needs to go on this way with the top connector up. It's got to go on like that. And I want it to point downward so I can get a wrench in underneath it. Alright, I got a fresh one of these little cheap bristle brushes. And around the inside of the bellows. And the instructions are a thin, even coat on both surfaces. So let's see what we can do here. This time, I'm not going to wait quite so long. I'll let this go until it's tacky. Well, I'd say that's tacky. Okay, so let's stuff this guy on before it gets so hard that it doesn't want to move. That's better. Yep. Okay. Great. Now is it upright? Let's turn that just a little. Okay. Things on the top. Oh, that went on much easier. I waited too long on the other one and it got too dry. I mean, it still went on and I think it'll seal okay, but I'm using this long extension with a universal to get on it. There's just no way to get a screwdriver straight on it. Now, it took a little bit of work, but I turned this over to full hard left. Got a long set of extensions, and anyway, with a universal joint, I was able to get up on it and get my torque wrench on it and get it tightened to spec. Well, now it's time for me to get the bell housing, finish preparing the bell housing and getting it installed. 3 things I have to do. One is, this is the hose that goes back into the transom assembly. I need to install that. The shift cable, I need to reinstall the shift cable sheath from the outside in here and screw that in. As we go together, I need to connect this hose. There's a hose here for the lube monitor that goes there. And then, once we get all that together, then I can install the bell housing, put in the bolts, get the bellows installed into this end of the bell housing, being careful not to break anything as I go. This hose is new. I mean, they keep doing revisions to things, so this is the old 25-year-old hose that just kind of has a bend in it. It's got a date of December 1997, and it was so hard that, you know, I couldn't get it off without cutting it. I had to slice the edge of it. So there's the new one. It has much more of a bend to it. And I guess the old one probably did bend like that, you know, when it was in place. It was just... So the book wants me to... First of all, there's an alignment mark here on the hose that goes to the water tube. That's good. I kept track of how the clamps came off. The book indicates, it sort of looks like they want you to install the clamp this way, but that would make it completely inaccessible from, it gets down behind the bellows. It came off the boat this way, so I'm going to install it the way it came off. And then the one on the bottom has to install so you can get a screwdriver to it in the bottom. Screwdriver and or socket. I know from putting this in the bell housing, you know, it goes in this way. And there's an alignment mark here on the side that looks like it should point toward the bell housing. Slide that down there. Come on, a little more. Alright, that's down. That way the mark is pointing at the side. And then the water tube is straight, going in. That looks about right, because it should go around the bellows. Just really want to make sure that I got it aligned right. Okay. Alright, well I got the hose attached. Both ends clamped. And so that's ready to go back in to be installed. Well, I've been trying to decide what sequence to use to put this together. Whether to run the shift cable in and then through, or put the water tube in first. And I was going to start with the shift cable, but I think it would be better. I want to get this in and get the hose routed and get any clips that I need while I'm turning things around, and then work to feed the shift cable in once I'm sure I've got everything in place. Well, let's see if I can get this bell housing fed in there now. There it goes. There's a recess in the back behind the bellows where that hose is supposed to end up. It's hard to get it there. And I don't want to drop this. I guess I'm going to put one of my... I've been using these ropes, this light rope to kind of as a safety. I didn't want to let the cylinders hang too far, and I don't want to drop this bell housing on the floor. Looks like the clamp is up against. Let's turn it this way for a minute. Oh, that helped. Come on, more. That's why I didn't want to put the cable in yet. Now I got two things I need to do. One is I have two clips that go on the hose over here that clip down the speedometer tube and the trim sensor wire. So I need to get that. I think the next step is I need to climb in the boat and put in and install the new grommet and cover and screws. And this is another one where they want the screws to have some of that perfect seal on them, which they call it perfect seal, but it's really That's their name for it. But you can't actually buy it like that anymore. It's actually this aviation forma gasket. Permatex. And I think it does two things. One is it provides some anti-vibration so things won't loosen up. But more than that is it keeps water out of the threads. It seals the threads up so that water can't get down along the sides of the bolt and corrode and cause you a mess later on. So, in any case, that inside of the boat part is really tough to get to and really tough to get any pictures of. So I'm going to go in. Something I've learned in the auto world is that if you want to install rubber like this, you need an assembly lube. And the book here doesn't recommend anything in particular, but I know in the auto world when we were installing hoses and things on engines, generally a mixture of dish soap and water is a good one, and because the water won't hurt the rubber, the dish soap's mild, and when the water evaporates, things stay put. So off to do that. I'll be back. So while taking video back here, while installing the water tube on the grommet was not feasible. I'll give you a look anyway, now that it's done. So this is from the right hand side of the engine. To get it back in, you run the risk of dropping things down into the exhaust pipe or even inside the flywheel housing. I didn't, but I probably should have put something across to catch things that you drop, because you're going to drop them. Let's see if I get down here far enough. See there underneath, you can see the other bolt, and you can see the fitting, about in the center of the picture there. Right there for the lube monitor. And it's really close. So anyway, I used blue tape over the head of the screw to hold it in the socket, so I could use the socket to finger start it, because there was no way of getting my fingers in there. I mean, I suppose the other choice is to try to get in and take that fitting off and get it out of the way. But it's difficult to do that. It's hard to work from the left-hand side because the steering system is in the way. And I got a little bit more room by turning the steering to the left, to port, which meant that the cylinder pulled in. But all that hardware is still in the way from trying to reach things on that side. Okay, I have the water tube installed, the grommet installed, and the plate installed, and the bolts tightened. And I've gone around the other side here and snapped in those clips to hold the wires and tubes in place. I'm about ready to put in the cable. A couple comments on the water tube though. One of the challenges with this whole thing is that things are really crammed together in a tight spot, and I mean, putting that grommet in was probably an hour and a half job, because the fitting for the gear oil monitor is right up close to one of the bolts that you need to get in there, and the steering linkage is in the way. I mean, I was able to turn the steering to get the lever out of the way, but you still have power steering cylinder and stuff, limiting you. So I used dish soap and got it in there. It took a lot of fiddling around, and the one bolt I could get in pretty easily. The one opposite bolt, the socket is right up against the fitting and the hose for the lube monitor, and I already did remove the plastic clamp, because the clamp, I couldn't get it apart before with the clamp in the way. So I moved the clamp, and that gave me just enough, but it's a finger start. I have two service manuals for this generation. One that was printed but when this boat was built and one that was printed when my 2018 was built. They're the same manual for the same things, but you know, one's a little newer. Anyway, one manual says to use the perfect seal, the stuff on the threads, and the other one doesn't, and this boat didn't have any sealant on the threads. So I put it back together the same way. You got to finger start those things, and with glue on them, I don't see how I'd ever get the second one finger started. The first one I could see. The one on the back side is up, you know, up against that fitting. I had to put tape in my socket to hold the head of the screw, the head of the bolt, so that I didn't drop it down in the bilge. And actually, when you drop things, they don't go in the bilge. They get stuck on the exhaust manifolds and the exhaust pipes. Not manifolds, the down pipes. And you got to go in there with a, if you drop it, you got to go in there with a mirror and one of these grabber tools to get it out. And I've done that 2 or 3 times with things. I probably should have found a tray or something I could slide underneath where I was working so things couldn't drop down in. But it's tight quarters. So anyway, that's done. I'm going to feed the shift cable through the bellows and into the boat, and then I'll bolt it down. And they want the cable to be lubricated with 2,4-C grease. It's the same stuff you use on some of these pivot points and that. So it's going to be kind of a messy job, but if you don't lubricate it, it probably won't go in. So I'm going to smear it up and put it in there. It's going to take a fair amount of monkeying around. And I still do have my 10-pound braided fishing line here that I'm going to put on the front of that cable just as a little extra insurance, because I just know how hard it is to get your hand down inside the manifolds, inside by the exhaust pipes, and you know, I just want to use this to kind of guide it out where it needs to come out. When it's done, the cable is supposed to come out underneath the exhaust pipe and come around the back and over the top of the power steering cylinder and then up to the engine. What I plan to do is I'm going to leave the cable straight. I'm going to get it fed in there and leave it straight, not route it yet. And then there are 2 things that have to happen. One is there's a spiral wrap on the inside that, as long as the cable's all greasy, I got to push that down underneath. And the second one is, while the cable's relatively straight, I'm going to push the core wire through. And then once the cable's back where it belongs, then I'll route it through and put it where it needs to go. First part is to try to get this thing fed into the shift cable bellows. What a pain in the neck. I'll just put it that way. Come on. It's been a tough, I'll say hour and a half or so. Had to take a couple 5-minute breaks. But I now have the cable installed this far. My fishing line idea wasn't a bad idea, and it did help. I was able to pull it part way, but I think it snagged up inside the bellows at one point, and I ended up cutting it and pulling it. I have it out. I just had to cut it, and then when I pulled the cable through, the remainder came with it. It was an idea. I'll tell you though, problem number 1, you got to get the cable started in the end of the rubber bellows. And on the new bellows, the hole's a lot smaller than it was on the old one. Of course, the old one was aged 25 years. So the hole's too small, and the end of the cable is pretty large. It's a brass end. It's meant to go through, but it's hard. I really worked on that. It probably took me 20 minutes with grease on it and punching grease into the end of the... You got to make sure that the boot is very well lubed. And then, you know, I had to turn this over full left, and so I could get my hands in there, because you end up needing 2 hands, one to hold the cable and one to hold the boot, and keep wiggling it around till you can get the end of the boot onto the cable or the cable into the boot. And then if you don't have enough grease, it doesn't work. I found that out. I had to pull it out and add more grease. And then you got to try to get it through. You don't want to use metal tools that might puncture the boot, right? It's a brand new boot. I did find my spark plug boot remover, and it helped me kind of scooch things along. Just for a little ways, and then you got two choices. One is to try to work with the boot a little bit extended. The other is to push the cable in and let it all collapse to a stack, which is what I did after I got it started. And then inside here, you got to get the end of the cable lined up with the hole through the transom plate. That took a fair amount of monkeying around. Like I say, the fish line didn't, it helped me get it started, but it was trapped between the engine mount and the exhaust pipe, and there was a bolt sticking down that it went on the wrong side of the bolt, or the end of the bolt. So I ended up using my long gripper tool and a screwdriver and fussing around in there, and came out here, pulled it out a little, pushed it in a little, held my mouth just right, kept working it till I got it on the opposite side of that bolt. Kind of used the gripper as a guide. Those things are really great. And right now I got it through, it's been pushed in. I'm about ready to bolt down this end. So I'm supposed to put a little sealant on the threads. In fact, I'll pull it out a little so I got a better shot at it. And we'll go push this back in. Use my special tool here to put that back in with. Fun. Oh, come on. I'm trying to hold the boot back and then turn this nut. Not gonna work, is it? This is just so much fun. I'd like to finger start that, but I can't because there's too much cable on the end. So I guess I'm going to try it this way and see if I can get it to start. See if it's going in. And it's not. Alright, come on. See if I got it started yet. Ah, that worked. Okay. But you're turning the whole cable and sheath and everything all the way up to the inside. So, well, I went in and checked the other end of the cable and made sure that it looked like it was going okay. And then the instructions on this are that to tighten securely, there's not a torque spec. And they want to make sure there's no more than 2 threads showing. So it's hard to see, but I would say there's, depending on where you're at, I'd say there's 1 to 2 threads showing. I'm going to hit it one more time just to be sure, but you got the perfect seal. You got the Permatex in the way, so you can't really see. But I can feel there's the nut, and there's one. I'd say it's probably like 1.5 threads. And, as I said when it came out, it wasn't all the way in flush, so. Ah yes, the core wire has to go in. Alright, so let's see if we can slide that guy in there. Alright, didn't want to go through the start, but it is now. Alright. There we go. And I didn't take out the safety wire and I didn't take the end off because my intent was to put that back in again, and it didn't seem to be any reason to do it, so I left that alone. I'm still going to have a little bit of fiddling around here to get the boot in exactly the right place. They want it to be in a relaxed condition when you get everything put together, so, and then at the end we'll clamp it. But for the moment we're okay. Alright. Now I can go up top and reassemble the end of the cable, make sure everything goes together up there. Well, I'm not going to do the full reassembly quite yet. I just want to kind of make sure that the parts go together. This is supposed to spin on finger tight to you bottom it finger tight, and then run the jam nut down, and then this end goes on over the core wire, and I just kind of want to get a visual and make sure that things look about right before I start buttoning up the bottom. Because the core wire then comes all the way through. When you do that, it lines up with the marks where the set screws were the last time. So that's all good. I just kind of want to make sure that things aren't too far out of line. I got the spiral wrap back on the shift cable down underneath. So this needs to get routed behind the steering system, behind the steering system and up here and reinstalled. But I am going to wait until I have the drive installed to make sure that everything goes together correctly, because right now it looks great. Well, now it's about time to get the U-joint bellows positioned in the bell housing, and then I need to get those two bolts, bell housing bolts in. And let's see, this may be a little fun, so let's see what it's going to take here. Well, I lost the top part. I think in order to make this work, I need to get the bell housing in position and thread the bolts in. I don't know if I can put the washers in at the same time. Guess I'm going to leave that out for the moment. See if we can get it. Just a few turns, just so it's up where it belongs. It says the bellows should be 2.5 inches. It says 2.5 inches from the bell housing. So we're a good 3. I need to reposition this bellows a little bit more. It's kind of tough, but I managed to get my spark plug tool in the first convolution, I'll call it, of the bellows behind the front of it, and push. And it looks like I made it. They want a measurement of 2.5 inches from the back of the bell housing, presumably where the shift cable goes in, and I'm right smack on it right now. So that looks good. I still need to put the clamp on, but not yet. Once you do that, you're committed. So now I'm gonna rotate the other way and put a pin on the other side temporarily. So I have the pins, just a few threads in on each one. And I just need to get this bellows in here. I took the gloves off trying to get clean hands to see if I can pull on it. I had the surfaces all degreased like the book says. Feels like I'm getting close. There it goes. There, now it's in. And this one, I've checked about 3 or 4 times, but it gets the ring on it, but it does not get bellows adhesive. According to the book, it's no instruction to use it on that. It just has the ring that that I will knock into there in a couple of minutes. These pins we'll have to do one at a time, and they torque to 110, and they need red Loctite, and they need what they call an activator, so I'll have to clean them out. Alright, well, to get these bolts in, you know, to use some of this clean and prime activator. Normally when you use Loctite like this you don't need to use activator, but certain materials, like the housing is aluminum and the bolt is stainless steel, and some of those the Loctite won't cure properly without the activator. You kind of need both. Now spray both the bolt and the hole. Make sure I wipe off the surface here. And it's supposed to sit for like 5 minutes, so. Alright, the threads are dry. Guess I'm gonna put it on the threads here. I'm going to switch over to the big wrench. This is the part that I wish had a better way, because trying to hold this housing down with a 2x4 is a little awkward, but I don't have a better way. They don't want you to let it run. You don't want it to go up and go out of its normal range, or so the book says. Careful what I bear against, but okay, there's 110. Hit this side with the activator. Okay. That dry. I did run these bolts in back and forth several times to try to clear out the residue from the past Loctite, It wasn't too bad, but I could see there was a little bit in the threads, and by running the bolts through a few times it cleared it out. I was going to wire brush the bolts, but they turned out to be pretty good, so. Just have to make sure that the washers are in there, but they are. Got that one. The trim switches are just sitting there. I haven't aligned them and put them back in place yet. They're just sitting there to sit there. In taking everything back and forth, the bellows came out of its seat, and with all of the greasing of cable and so forth, there was a lot of grease in around the boot, and I had greasy hands, so this got some of the lip was greased again. So I've gone back through, and it seemed to work best. Turn the drive to one extreme, and then go in here with lacquer thinner and a paper towel and clean the exposed areas and get under the lip on one side, and then turn it the other way and clean on the other side, so that I eventually cleaned the lip of the boot all the way around with lacquer thinner, and I cleaned the inside of the bore again. The manual seems to indicate that those surfaces ought to be clean, and I guess you wouldn't want the rubber sneaking out of the groove. It's not glued, because the book doesn't say to glue it. So I've got it now straight. 1x2 worked really nice for a lot of things, for holding this drive in position. So now it's straight. It's all in its groove. This is the sleeve that needs to go in there, kind of like so. I bought an aftermarket tool that fits in there like that. Then you need a driving rod to go down the center, and since I have the official Mercury alignment bar, it has a step here that is just right for, it seems like, for driving that, and I don't want to hurt my alignment bar, but I don't think it will. It feels like the tool is aluminum, and all we're doing is pushing something in. The opposite end of my alignment bar is threaded for another adapter, and I don't want to hurt it. So I'm going to hit it with a soft-faced hammer that presumably won't hurt the end of my alignment bar. If it does, if things don't go the way I plan, I'll stop. But so, oh, and they also want you to lube this with Power Tune, which is an engine cleaner, and Mercury makes one. I wasn't able to get it. The shop I went to had the Johnson Evinrude version, which is supposed to do the same kind of thing. So let's see how this goes. I'll put a little bit of that in there. Just kind of smear it on the rubber. We'll smear a little bit on the part. And let's see if I can get it started. I don't think I want to go just in blind, although I may have to. don't know whether it'll... Let's see if we can get it in this way. Not yet. That time I think it went. I'll go whack it. I'm gonna whack it a couple more to be sure it's all the way in. Sure sounds like it is. Just had to move the camera back and the light back far enough that I could get a good swing at it. And then it went in one shot. So now that I got that sleeve in, I wanted to kind of double check. The question is, how do you know whether it's far enough? When it went in, it seemed like there was really no question, right? I hit it with the dead blow hammer, whack, and I had been tapping, banging, banging, and nothing happened, and then it went ka-chunk in one shot. But just to be sure, I've been measuring the depth, and the depth of the ring from the face of the casting here is like 2 7/8 inches. And it's very consistent all the way around. It's 2 7/8 inches. You know, very, very, very close. I mean, some places it varies a 32nd of an inch or something. It's very, very close. And when you get your finger in here, you know, you can feel the back side of the boot or the bellows going around the edge, and it, by feel, it feels like about the same, I'll say, call it the same depth of margin all the way around. So I'm happy with that. But I always like to double check, because that's the way things go. Now, I came up with something that's maybe a little more unusual here. So just as I'm starting to prepare, there was a fair amount of buildup in this. This is the water channel for the Outdrive. This is where the water hose connects to go to the engine. And it had a fair amount of residue and stuff in there. And when I cleaned it up, there's a pocket laying back in the back here where the aluminum is kind of eroded away. And I've been trying to figure out what to do with that one. It's, you know, the hole's probably a 1/4 inch deep and a 1/2 inch wide, and eventually it would eat its way through the casting, and the casting would be bad. So I just wanted to stop it, and my suspicion is that, you know, it probably started deteriorating, and water, now that there's a pocket, you know, water will sit in the bottom of that pocket. You can see that pocket right there in the back. And so I treated that. I cleaned it up with lacquer thinner. Scotch Brite lacquer thinner, and then something I've used before, which is a Permatex product. Other companies, I think Loctite makes it. I just happen to have the Permatex one. It's green, and it's called penetrating grade, and it's meant for you can use it to seal threads or to lock threads that are already assembled. It'll wick into the gaps. And I have also used it on aluminum castings that were porous. Now, they really want you to get the casting hot, like 200 degrees, for maximum effectiveness. Well, I ain't getting that casting to 200 degrees, so I put it in at room temperature, with my hope being that it wicks in to the surface kind of and protects it. Then I'm going to let it dry, and I think before I plug the Outdrive in, I'm going to fill that hole with a little bit of JB Weld to try to keep the, you know, let's say I'll clean the surface again, and I'll put a little something in there to try to fill the pocket so that it doesn't hold water anymore. And, you know, it survived 25 years. It ought to survive a few more with that. The residue kind of looked like it was residue from propylene glycol antifreeze from over the years. We got that in. Bolts are in. I had to go back and reroute the tubing. Once I got this in, I turned the drive over and adjusted. There are two clips that hold one holds the speedometer tube and one holds the trim sensor. I wasn't happy where I had them. They were a little too far back. I made some adjustments so that to make sure that those wires and tubes didn't get pinched down here, and move some of the slack up in the back a little further. You can see up here is the valve for this is the port for the lube monitor. It comes all the way through, and on the inside, on the back, there's a brass push-on fitting. And here's the hose that is already connected up above. It's already got a little bit of lube in it, I think. And the instructions are to loop a tie wrap and position it over the end of the hose. Doesn't need to be tight at this point. It should be a little bit loose so you can slide it and so forth. But hang it on the hose and then put the hose in and tighten the tie wrap. So let's see how we do here. Ooh, well, feels like it went right on. It's tight quarters in there. So let's see if we can, I just want to get my finger up there and make sure, yeah, that it's bottomed out, and it seems to be. And the hose fitting starts about right there. It's another one of those crazy things where it's like slide that guy in there, like so. Pull that tight. Now I need to clamp the clamp like this over the end of the shift cable bellows where the cable comes out. And so I've got the drive turned over to the right so I can reach it. It may be possible to do this by just kind of fussing with it, but the risk is that if this isn't crimped right and it gets too flattened out, that you'll end up with water in the boat. So Mercury, nobody sells a tool for this, but they show you a plan for it. So I made a tool. And what they tell you to do is in the book it says a 3/4 inch. They want, when you're done, to have a 1/2 inch hole that will clamp this down evenly. And right now, if you go in and clamp over the end of the rubber, it's about a 1/2 inch. This will clamp over the end of it pretty nicely. The instructions say get a 3/4 inch nut. Well, I bought a 3/4 inch nut following their instructions, and that was like, and tried to put it in between here, and that was like, there's no way you're going to get a 1/2 inch hole with a 3/4 nut. At first I thought, perhaps the minor diameter of the threads would fit. It wasn't. So I went back and got a 1/2 inch nut, because essentially a 3/4 inch, a 1/2 inch nut is about 3/4 of an inch across the flats. So I thought perhaps that's what they meant. But what you do, and I had my son-in-law help me because he's a pretty darn good welder. I bought a pair of pliers. He welded the nut in for me. And then you go down the middle. He went with a die grinder, went through the center and flattened it out. And then I went through to make sure that things fit correctly. I went through with a file and I dressed the edges until it clamped flat, like so. And then I put it in my drill press with a 1/2 inch drill and went through the center and made a 1/2 inch hole. So it's a pretty much round 1/2 inch hole. I mean, it's a little tricky doing a split nut, but it went through. So that's where that clamp sits and needs to get crimped down. And the book says they want this bellows to be in a relaxed position. Now, right now it's extended some because the drive is turned. So they specify what relaxed means to be from the end of the boot to the bell housing to the left of the picture, where the cable goes. I mean, their language is a little bit tricky, but it appears that they want this to be 2.5 inches from the back of the bell housing, and where the cable goes in, there's kind of a boss there, and so I've measured 2.5 inches, and I've squeezed this back and forth until I got to 2.5 inches. Very, very close. I did also, before I put things together, I looked at where this bellows sat relaxed all by itself, up against the, versus the exhaust tube down there. And their dimension stretches the bellows maybe a 1/2 inch or so. But I've looked at this now, and it doesn't collapse all the way in. Right now it's like almost all the way extended. I mean, if you tip the drive up, it extends some more. But it seems to be well within its range. That's where they claim they want it. So I'm going to get my tool and I'm going to crimp that dude down. So there it is, crimped down. I think it's in good shape. The only thing I didn't like was the ends of the tips were starting to dig into the rubber a little bit. But I kind of finessed it and I got it down, and it looks like it's pretty well crimped, so I'm going to leave it at that and move on to the next job. The tool worked pretty well, you just have to be a little gentle. Well, it's time to plug the stern drive unit back into the boat, and I've got the engine alignment checked and corrected. Alright, now it's time to finish hooking up the shift cable. It's been routed to the inside here. Goes around the back of the steering. And comes up here. And so far, I threaded the rod in finger tight, and now I'm supposed to tighten the jam nut. I don't know why the jam nut's tight up against there, but I must have done that, but I don't know why. That should be finger tight, and then the jam nut should go up against the brass thingy so that it doesn't move. Alright, that's that. Then they want to make sure that it's in all the way in forward gear. So I have an elastic strap on the end of on the propeller, tying the propeller full counterclockwise, so that it's as counterclockwise as it can go. And then we're supposed to install this end guide, and there's the core wire that we've pushed all the way in, and so that comes in down to the end like so. And you want to make sure that it comes all the way to the end. It should bottom out. And then I know in the end they're going to want this to be 6 inches long, so I'm going to just double check it from center to center. And since it didn't move it, I mean, it really ought to be. We'll go from that point on the brass to the... interesting. Well, it's not 6 inches. It's off by a mile. Well, I had to go back and rotate the propeller again, even though I had a elastic strap on it, because it still wasn't all the way in forward gear. And then I pushed this back, went back and checked it, made sure it was locked in. And now, if I lock this down at 6 inches, we go from here to here. Yeah, I'm really close. It's I'm going to call it within a 1/16 of an inch. That's with the core wire all the way bottomed out in here. So that's good. Now, because it should be, I mean, if I look at this right, it should have come back right where it was before. I can look through the hole and I can see where the core wire nuts were the last time it was assembled. So the cable is exactly the same length. It went back in as far as it did before. And so now I just need to put the end on it. And we'll take these little bitty screws. I'm going to do it one at a time so I don't drop one. Just finger start that. Make sure it goes all the way to the end. And there's a hole here that you can see the end of the core wire. So it's all going back. I shouldn't have any trouble with adjustment. It should be, I mean, I'll double check everything. But essentially, the cable is going back right where it was. Make sure you're all the way down. Tighten with a 3/16 inch socket. And it says tighten securely. There's a torque spec on this. I'll have to find it. And I found the spec. They want 20 inch-pounds on these little guys. So I'm going to use my little bending beam wrench here. And let's see if we can get that to... There's one place in the book they tell you, and one place in the book they say just tighten securely, but man, what's securely mean? You know, what can a cable handle? And there's 20 on that one. there's 20 on that one. Because you don't want this end to come off, or it won't shift, you know. Now, the next thing is, I've had some fun with this. This cable doesn't like to stay where it needs to be. It has to be behind the cylinder back here for the power steering. And then it comes up this way. And it should drop in here, and I just have to remember where the pin goes. And then the front end goes up here. Come on. Like so. So I need to tighten that one down. And so the rear barrel is in there. Okay, so yeah, what I think I did the last time, and it's even loose yet, is I took off the shift assist in the rear. And I didn't take it all the way off. I think I just moved it enough like that, because there's a pin. One of these that has to go in there and retain that barrel. All I need to do is drop this pin in the hole. I can get in here and bend that a little bit so it can't come out. And this guy can go back on. Just checking to see this one goes down to a stop. Alright, this one tightened to a shoulder. This one did not, so I left it just a little bit loose. It didn't have a shoulder, so it just had threads. So it's a locking nut, so it's not going to vibrate off, just enough that the nuts are loose. And it's a little hard to check with the shifted assist in place, but basically it's in forward gear, and my shift mechanism is not loaded. It's got slack in it. So I'll probably get the book and go through full adjustment checks, but knowing that I put this cable back exactly where it was before, we should be good. So, hey, I think that's it. All I got to do now is clean up my mess. Now I'm just going to double check the adjustment on here, on the shift cables. Alright, got that pin out. These things are kind of a pain in the neck, but I'm going to take this one back off, get the shift assist out of the way. Well, it's a little bit of a judgment call. Kind of want to push this all the way in, and I guess I'll say is I'll put the pin in here, and it's pushed all the way in, it's flexible. I don't want to start turning this. I didn't ever have any shifting problems with this, so I just kind of want to make sure everything still lines up, and it seems like it does, so I'm going to leave it alone and try it when it gets in the water in spring. Alright, got the pin back in, got that tightened back down, shift assist is in place. I think we're good for now. And so that's how you replace the bellows in a Mercruiser Alpha1 stern drive. Man, what a job. I'll just say is this one's a challenge, and I'm glad that it's all done. I won't know for sure how good I did until spring comes and I can put it in the water and make sure nothing leaks. But I went slow. I followed all the procedures by the book. I was very, very careful, so I'm confident it's going to work. But when I started this, you know, I had pretty much all the tools. I went and bought tools and supplies to do this right. But it's amazing how much work goes into this. So that's all for now.